and you're very welcome to everybody joining us this evening for this webinar, Make the Right Choice for the New Leaving Certificate Biology Specification. So whether you've already chosen evolution as your textbook of choice, or whether you're still not quite sure and you're trying to figure out which is the best package for you, hopefully this evening will be an informative webinar for you to show you how evolution supports you as a teacher, but also engages your students as well with the new specification as well. So who are we? Well, my name is Humphrey Jones. As I said, I'm the head of science and biology at St. Columba's College in Dublin, where I teach biology and junior science, and I'm also the guidance counsellor there. And I'm currently the chairperson of the Irish Science Teachers Association. I'm very proud to be the co-author of Evolution with my good friend and colleague, Yvonne Higgins-Vallely, who will join us a bit later on, who's head of science at Aina College in Bundoran, in County Donegal, where she teaches biology and chemistry, and is a former chairperson of the ISTA. As I said, of co-author of Evolution. So this evening's webinar is going to be broken down to kind of three main sections. The first one, start with a plan. We'll talk a little bit about how we as teachers need to, when we're introducing a new specification, start on a very firm planning foundation. And we'll talk about what are the key elements of that plan from the get-go, and then how evolution supports that plan. We'll talk a little bit about why we think that evolution is more than just a textbook. It's got lots of brilliant features, and hopefully that will engage the student, but also support you as the teacher in delivering the specification in the classroom. And finally, we're going to try to see evolution in action. We're going to talk a little bit about how I and Yvonne use the book already, the various different features and how they all align, I suppose, with the goals of the new biology specification as well. So I'm sure at this stage we're all pretty familiar with this diagram, which outlines the structure of the new biology specification. There are three what they call contextual strands: organization of life, processes of structures and processes of life, and interactions of life, which I suppose dictate what the content that we have to teach the students. Within the center of the specification, that is the nature of science, what they call the unifying strand. It's common to both chemistry, physics, and biology. And everything we do in terms of interacting with those conceptual strands, we do so with a view on building scientific literacy in our students as well. And then surrounding the specification, we then have three cross-cutting themes: sustainability, health, and technology. And these are themes that we are tasked with using as lenses to explore the contextual strands in maybe different ways, trying to make the course as practical for the student as possible and as real as a student as possible. So when we're, say, for example, studying the breathing system, obviously we'll talk about the health effects of that. Will be issues that might relate to that, but we'll also talk about, say, how technology might improve that health, and then sustainability might be linked into other topics like ecology. But also right throughout the course, there's opportunities to talk about how new technologies, we'll ask whether are they sustainable technologies or not. As well as the strands and the learning outcomes which define them, then the specification also outlines the key competencies. And these are, I suppose, skills-based competencies that we are tasked again with teaching our students over the course of the 2-year cycle, and embedding these skills in our students as well. You know, obviously with assessment in our mind as well, these kind of skills will be assessed within those examinations and within the additional assessment components too. Around those, excuse me, around those 7 key competencies then are literacies and numeracies. Again, we need to be mindful and cognizant of introducing opportunities for students to use these skills right the way through as we explore the contextual strands. So onto the first part of tonight's webinar, and that's start with a plan. It's really, really important that we as teachers, when we're introducing a new specification into our working lives, that we start on a really firm planning foundation. And I'm going to talk about each of these individual points in a second, but obviously getting to know the specification, get to know how it's structured, learning outcomes which underpin it, all the way through to planning for assessment and building our lessons plans around that. So let's talk about the first one first of all, getting to know the specification. Well, you probably all now received a hard copy of the specification, so you can see this, but obviously it's available online as well. And it's important, I suppose, on the first glance to take a look and see, well, what's new? What's different about this course and the last course? And really, there's been refinements, but nothing really drastically new. So what we see within classification, we see introduction of the idea of phylogenetic classification, comparing that to what we used to talk about before in terms of phonetic. Within genetics, we reintroduce epigenetics and bioinformatics, and maybe artificial selection. And within ecology, additional little topics like species diversity index and carrying capacity have made their way into the course. And then when you say, well, what's gone? Well, obviously there's been a realignment of lots of different topics, and there might be small parts of the topics that we've taught in the past that are no longer in the course. But some of the bigger areas that have left us are the sense organs, the eye, the ear, and the skin. The lymphatic system as a standalone topic is now gone, and the parts of the brain is no longer a part of that either. Now, when you open up the specification, you can see that the main body of it are based around learning outcomes, and it's really important that we get comfortable with these. And there's probably a sour taste in our mouth a little bit when we've had to work with learning outcomes with junior science, and maybe even some of us within agricultural science. I taught agricultural science as well in the past. And they were very difficult to unpack and probably created inconsistencies in what maybe I unpacked, what I've meant by the learning outcome, and what maybe another teacher thought about it too. What I will say is that the new biology specification is much improved. The NCCA have now introduced this hybrid model, which not only just provides the learning outcome, but provides a little bit extra context for that. So a second column in relation to that. Now, still, it's not perfect. It's still not probably as descriptive as we would like it to be, but it's important for us and within our departments and individually to sit down, look at those learning outcomes and unpack them and say, what does this mean for me and for my students as well? But it is made easier by this hybrid model. I'm not going to go through all of the learning outcomes, but you can see how the learning outcomes are outlined here. So you've got the learning outcome on the right-hand side, in this case, outline the cell cycle, and then the content on the left-hand side under the student learn about column gives a bit more context. So maybe a little bit of the depth of treatment that we wanted with the junior cycle one is there for us to plan our lessons properly. Learning outcomes which contain the term investigate using primary data usually align with an experiment the students need to actually gather data themselves on. So it's important to be mindful that those learning outcomes exist as well. And we'll return to that a little bit later on. We'll talk about those investigations a bit later. Now, the specification doesn't just have information on the learning outcomes. It's important to also look at the other sections too, including information on the biology and practice investigation. There's also some really interesting areas there too on teaching for student learning. So how can we maximize our time to ensure our students are learning in the classroom, and also on assessment too, which we'll talk about as well. Once you're comfortable with I suppose the content of the specification, the first task then is to build units of learning. This is the approach which has been recommended by the NCCA and by IJA, that we teach the course using a thematic approach. So this means that we don't actually start on strand one and we work our way through the learning outcomes. We finish all those learning outcomes and we pop onto strand two, and we work our way through that as well. This would lead to a lot of repetition because a lot of those learning outcomes will be relevant to various different themes. For example, the 3 contextual strands all contain learning outcomes related to DNA and genetics and informatics and genomics. And it would make much more sense if they were all together. In fact, they're actually packaged as information of life within each of the 3 contextual strands. So we're being asked to teach in a more thematic approach to build units of learning. Now, we have done this for evolution. We have already created 12 ready-made units of learning, incorporating the learning outcomes across the strands, because this actually was what felt natural for us, really, when we started designing the textbook. And also, as I said, I taught agricultural science. It was what we were recommended to do for that as well. And we're the only textbook which has aligned our content in a thematic approach. All the other textbooks have aligned according to the strands. Now, we've mentioned those cross-cutting themes as well. And probably a difficulty in planning is try to incorporate opportunities for students to explore these strands when you're teaching a particular topic. So we need to be able to plan to incorporate opportunity for students to think about their health, or maybe health as a wider term, not just human health, but maybe ecosystem health or soil health, whenever we're engaging with a learning outcome. What we've done within Evolution is we've provided science and society case studies, which are labeled either technology, health, or sustainability. Sometimes more than one of those lenses are relevant. And we've embedded those into every single chapter, which gives students opportunity to engage with that material right the way as they explore the course. So again, it's making the planning around that a little bit easier for us. Now, biology, of course, is a practical subject, and we need to plan for practical work. And a very common question we've got so far are there mandatory experiments? And the answer really is yes and no. The specification outlines 13 learning outcomes where we ask students to investigate using primary data. And we call them within the textbook specified investigations. These are a mixture of short and more complex investigations as well. But I will say that the 13 investigations very much should be seen as the minimum amount of practicals that students should be doing to truly engage with the learning outcomes and to align it with the NCCA's plan, I suppose, in terms of the teaching approach they want us to take when introducing the specification. We need to bring more opportunity to bring extra practicals into the course as well. So this was also in the back of our minds as we were planning not only our own implementation of the course in our classrooms, but also as we built the textbook package as well. And I'll talk about where we have embedded additional practicals to focus the students and allow the students to use this investigative approach, an inquiry-led approach to teaching and to learning, my apologies. Some investigations, worth noting, require students to investigate multiple factors. I'll give you an example of this. This is one here on the rate of transpiration of plants, which is a new investigation. And you can see that there's 6 factors listed there. Now, what we're told by the NCCA is that students will need to investigate one of those factors themselves, at least, to gather primary data on that. But they can use secondary data, either sourced from you, the teacher, or from maybe their classmates who have investigated a different factor, and they can use that within the reports then as well. So they should be aware of how each of the factors might be varied, but might only need to gather data on one particular one of those. And here's another example, an experiment we're probably familiar with, the rate of photosynthesis. We've got 3 factors now which we will be tasked with investigating. And with any good course, we should always be thinking about planning for assessment. And as I mentioned, the specification actually has a very good section on assessment. It tasks us or challenges us to come up with lots of varied forms of assessment. Now, assessment, as we're all very know, it comes in 2 forms: formative assessment and summative assessment. And again, we're always trying to plan for formative assessment and checking for learning, but often sometimes it kind of takes over. So we were quite cognizant of that, and we've tried to embed formative assessment directly into the textbook and as many opportunities as possible. And formative assessment that scaffolds and builds confidence in students as they then task with summative assessment, which we will use as tracking learning progress and of course leading up eventually to final examinations. So in our textbook we have our learning portfolio, which is designed to be a formative assessment tool, and then our end of chapter assessments are aimed more towards the summative assessment. And we also, within our learning portfolio, have embedded all of the learning, all of the sample paper questions, or as many as we could, per topic within that. So once you've considered all of those things, once you've considered comfort with the structure and layout of the specification, you've analysed the learning outcomes and perhaps unpacked them slightly to kind of get a bit more meaning for you, and you've created your units of learning. And then you maybe built around engaging lessons within that. You then need, of course, to think about your key competencies and the practical activities and the assessment and how we're embedding those cross-cutting themes. We can then set out in our scheme of work, our main planning document. And we spent a lot of work doing all of these various particular points, but we did it for ourselves so that we could have these embedded within our classroom too. And we have, as part of the Evolution package, built a lot of planning documents, including a comprehensive thematic approach in terms to our scheme of work. So that's a scheme of work which is included in our teacher's resource book, which is making its way to schools now, but it's also downloadable as well and editable too. So hopefully once you've gone through all of those planning documents, you're ready to implement it within the classroom. What we think then, our evolution has been it's been a long-term project for us, and it's been brilliant to see it kind of evolve, pardon the pun, over the last couple of years. From just the idea of a textbook to something, a suite of packages that provide not just an engaging textbook for the student, and also a learning portfolio, investigative log for them to record their experience and log their knowledge, but also a series of tools that are really usable for the teacher, that they can use it to implement the specification fully within their classrooms. So not only do we have a thoughtfully designed and hopefully engaging textbook, but we also have then our teacher resource book, our learning portfolio investigative log, clever 2-in-1 design. Flip it over and it's the investigative log. I'll talk about that in a moment. We also then have our teacher resource book, as I said, with all textbook portfolio solutions, advice and practicals, extra cross-cutting theme case studies, etc. And then within Gill Classroom, Gill Education's brand new online portal, we have a suite of detailed PowerPoint presentations, interactive quizzes, informative videos, and those ready-made documents, including that thematic scheme of work, so you can, from the get-go, get started. So let's talk about those little points individually very quickly. As I said, we've got this quite clever 2-in-1 learning portfolio and investigative log. As I said, we really wanted to make sure that that formative assessment was embedded within the textbook itself. It's different, you know, you get a textbook, a chapter, and you start reading through it, and then you look to the back of the chapter and you're trying to find questions which relate to it. We wanted to make sure that we had tasks which related to specific sections of the book. So in a rather unique way, we have divided up our chapters into sections, or effectively lessons. And each of those lessons then ends with a little portfolio check. I'll show you the little link for that later on. And then the students are sent to the portfolio and they complete a task related to just that particular section. The tasks within the learning portfolio are designed to be varied, so lots of different types, true or false, fill in the blanks, reading comprehensions, word association, all these various different things, which is what's outlined within the assessment section of the specification. But they're designed to also be scaffolded, so that allow for the knowledge to be built upon as they progress through the textbook as well. We've also embedded the sample exam paper questions, topic by topic, as they would appear, as they relate to each particular chapter within the textbook as well. Our investigative log, which I said is on the other side of the portfolio book, contains spaces for all of those specified investigations for students to write and record how they got on with those investigations, present their data and analyze their data. But it also provides questions as well, which will test the students' knowledge of that investigation too. Now, you can use both of these books as a form of homework. You can use both of these books, these tasks, as maybe an activity to start off the lesson. And the student can use them as well as a means of self-directing their own learning, which is something that's outlined within the specification as well. Within the teacher's resource book, when we sat down and talked about what we wanted in the teacher's resource book, well, what I didn't want was, didn't want a teacher resource book which we got and we put on the shelf and we forgot about it. I wanted it to be, we wanted it to be really, really usable, and something that you could constantly refer to. So in terms of the planning, we've got loads of planning resources because we know that's what we needed to implement in the classroom. So we have all the learning outcomes are mapped. So every learning outcome, we outline exactly what chapters they're dealt within. We've got a list of equipment that every science lab needs. I found that very useful at the start of the summer when I was preparing my my order. And as I said, we've got that editable, that scheme of work, which is broken down into those cross-cutting, into those themes, so we can start off in that straight away. And then within the body of the teacher resource book, for each chapter, we've provided information on any of the specified practicals, and we've also added suggested additional practicals. As I mentioned, we want our course to be really, really practical. We want our students to be engaging with the scientific process and as many opportunities as possible. So we included lots of additional practicals within the teacher resource book, which don't require specialist equipment. In a lot of cases, just basic lab equipment is all you need. And they are giving students the opportunity to engage with all the various different aspects of that. Again, the specification outlines within the teaching for student learning section that we want to introduce opportunity for students to discuss and debate as much as possible. So within our TRB, we have at least 2 debate questions for every single chapter, with some pros and cons to help the teacher guide the debate. And we've also included additional science and society case studies, which are again focused around those cross-cutting themes, with questions as well for the students to engage with. We also want it to be really, really useful in terms of making sure that all of the answers to all of the questions that appear either in the textbook, in the learning portfolio, in the investigative log are all included there within the teacher resource book as well. And what's brilliant about them is that they're different colors. So they straight away you can find them instantly within the textbook or within the teacher resource book. So the solutions for all the learning portfolios are there. The solutions for all the sample exam paper questions we've embedded in the portfolio are there. And the solution to our end of chapter assessment solutions are also in there as well. Now, where we've structured our end of chapter assessment questions using Bloom's taxonomy. So we've kind of, again, scaffolded it up, started from lower order questions and building up to higher order questions. Where maybe there's no automatic correct answer, but maybe it's a more complex thing, we've provided, where possible, success criteria. So you could, as a teacher, can implement the success criteria to help you grade that work. Now, I know there's a lot of concern and a lot of, there's some excitement as well. There's some concern around the biology and practice investigation and that element of the assessment that 40% project the students will carry out. Within the textbook, there's a dedicated chapter in the textbook which guides you through each of the stages. And there's, again, tips for success for the student. And also, I think really importantly, guidance on how to use AI and what's the appropriate use of AI and what's inappropriate use of AI as well. Within the investigative log, then, the students have a space to record their progress to each of the stages of that process. We know that it was a process that isn't linear. So again, we try to design that space to make sure that students can go back and forth within that and you know, express ideas, maybe evolve ideas as it goes through as well. And then within the teacher resource book, we've added additional advice as well on the biology practice investigation for you too. Now, as well as those 3 books, Gill Education have released a new online platform, Gill Classroom, and a lot of you are already on it. And within that, we've tried to provide as much useful resources that you can be implemented in your classroom almost straight away. So we have a suite of comprehensive PowerPoints that are detailed but not cluttered, that utilize brilliant visuals from the textbook, and we think are engaging ways of guiding learning in your classroom. They're all downloadable and they're all editable. So if they don't quite fit what you want, or if you want to embed some of those extra additional case studies, you can do so as you progress through it. And we also have a series of videos. Those videos are based around the specified investigations, and hopefully they will guide you. We'll give you a little sample of those in a moment. And also a series of interactive quizzes for you to explore as well. So again, additional resources that I'm already finding really useful. The PowerPoints have been great for guiding my lessons. Quizzes the students have really enjoyed for testing their knowledge, taking a bit of ownership as well for their own assessment, which I think is really important as well. So I'm going to show you a little sample of one of our videos, and this is Yvonne talking through one of the specified investigations, and these are one of the videos we produced. Just be mindful that for some of you, if you're on full screen, it might appear on a different window, so just be mindful of that.
In this investigation, we are going to look at the effect of surface area on the rate of osmosis. To do so, we are going to use potato cubes. I have cut out 2 potato cubes that are 2 centimeters in length, their width and their height. which means my 2 cubes are equal in volume. I am now going to cut one of the cubes into 8 smaller cubes that will have a 1 centimetre length side.
So you can see there, really clear, concise instructions. We've tried to focus when we have presented our structure of our experiments, that they're not using too much specialist equipment. They're easy to follow and easy for the students to carry out as well. So on to the final section of our webinar this evening, and what I want to try to focus on today as well, how do we bring all of these particular resources, all these various aspects of the textbook, how does that translate to using it in the classroom? Because again, when Yvonne and I sat down and we talked about how we structure our textbook, we want it to be something that we can use in our classroom as well, and it's something we are using in our classroom as well. So whether it's introducing a new topic, whether it's introducing it and going through the detail, exploring those contextual strands, whether it's incorporating those cross-cutting themes or initiating debate, we want to make sure that evolution works for those. We'll talk a little bit about how those features can work for you. So to introduce a topic, and again, the specification outlines here within the teaching and learning section, to make sure that students are tasked with finding connections. And what we do straight away from the get-go is we introduce what the learning outcomes for the teacher really on the top of every chapter title. So the learning outcomes are listed. In this case, you can see that some of the learning outcomes relate to the unifying strand, and some of them relate to strand 3. The little icons refer to the skills, the key competencies that we're going to try to focus on within this chapter. And then we unpacked the learning outcomes into more broader statements within the very start of the chapter. Below that, we have a little eye opener. And this is something I really enjoyed using already in the first few weeks of the new course as a means of engaging the students at the very start of the process. All of the chapters start with a little eye opener. It might be a little fact like this one, a little reading comprehension, or it might be a concept cartoon. They're designed to just to grab the student's attention and also get them to ask and start asking questions, because of course that's the key to being a good scientist. We can task the students with finding connections. So we list the chapters which we think relate to that particular chapter. So bacteria we think relates to all these. And this can be another great task that you can do with your students and say, well, how do you, we've studied the digestive system before, how does that relate to bacteria? So getting the students to again think of that. And we're also introducing some of the new key subject vocabulary within that opening page. Opening page, again, it's not too cluttered. We think it's got functional elements. Just introduce your lesson and get your students thinking and asking questions about that topic from the get-go. Within the lesson body, as I mentioned, what we've done quite unusually, we think, is we've broken up the chapters into what we think are into more manageable chunks, more manageable sections. In a lot of cases, they're just a single lesson. Some cases, there might be a second lesson. But they're more manageable for you as the teacher, because you can plan on implementing a particular series of concepts, and they're naturally broken up as well. But they're also more manageable for the student as well. So it starts off with a little bit of the learning outcome unpacked again, so a little bit more detail from that initial one and from the opening page. And they're more manageable for you as a teacher, but also for the students to assess how they're learning, etc. And then each section ends with one of these little portfolio links. And when they see that, the students are directed to their learning portfolio. And in this case, they go to chapter 7, they go to learning portfolio, learning check number 1, and they've got a little task there that is directly related to what they've just learned in that section. So there's our formative assessment built in straight away into our lesson. And I think this was really, really important for us to think about that. Now, this is something we often, as teachers, struggle with. I certainly struggle with this as you're going through text. It's like, here, answer the questions number 1 to 8 in the back. We have these straight away as well. Now, what's great about the learning portfolio, as I mentioned earlier on, it doesn't have to be necessarily a homework task. We can use the flipped classroom model, which I've already started recommending because we know that the course is quite broad. So what you can ask the student to do is read maybe section 1 of that chapter for homework, write notes on that. So again, this is really good skill they're developing, breaking down knowledge, new knowledge, summarizing it. And then when they come back to the class, they can use the formative assessment, the learning checks, as a means of initiating the learning process at the start of that lesson again. And you can launch maybe into section 2 then in your class from that. And crucially, as I mentioned, there's a little screenshot within the teacher resource book. There is the learning portfolio solutions there for you as well. Within the lesson body, we've tried to write it in a way that is simple and engaging for the students to understand. We've made sure that our images are clear and vibrant and not overpowering. I think that was something we really wanted to do. As well as obviously text and image, we've incorporated little sound clips within the ebook. So if a student wants to know, well, how do I pronounce that word, they can click on that.
Prokaryotic. Prokaryotic.
And it gives them a verbal cue for that particular word. And that's embedded within the ebook on Guild Classroom portal. And also, we've embedded lots of relevant YouTube videos within the textbook, at least 2 or 3 per chapter, sometimes more, which again might emphasize or maybe bring the cross-cutting themes into the conversation in relation to that particular topic. We're conscious always that there are topics which are new and there are topics which we might maybe be not too familiar with and students might not have heard of before. So what we've done is embedded little boxes called focus on boxes within the chapters, which are particular topics or particular aspects of the topic that we're learning about that we really want the student to focus in on. Maybe it relates to a cross-cutting theme, maybe it's a new concept, or maybe it's just one of those keystone concepts that we need the students to understand. So in this case, within the chapter 7, the bacteria chapter, the microbiome is something that they may then haven't heard of before, or certainly a term we wouldn't have maybe used as often within the old course. We're grabbing our attention saying this is something we need to focus on, both for the student to focus on, but also for the teacher as well. And again, it's linking as well, not just bacteria, the chapter we're talking about, it's linking to nutrient recycling, which is probably it's in a different unit, so we can bring it across as well. With the cross-cutting themes, as I said, it can definitely be difficult to implement that in terms of planning. So what we've done is we've brought those additional, those cross-cutting themes as science and society case studies directly into the textbook. We've put extra ones in the teacher resource book in every single chapter. And as I said as well, as recommended by the NCCA within the specification, lots of opportunity for students to debate and discuss, and all of those features are directly within the learning portfolio as well. And in terms of practical work, we know we have to deal with those specified practicals. And so what we try to do with the textbook, I know my students love to see text and image together, a little bit of dual coding. So we try to incorporate a really visual way of presenting the steps, or the recommended steps in the investigations. As I said, we've tried to implement easy to use procedures where possible that don't necessarily need lots of special equipment. For investigations which maybe have different factors, we've incorporated maybe alternative methods within that, and teachers can decide which one suits them and their needs. And again, within each specified practical, there is an investigative log link, just like the learning portfolio link. And they're directed to the investigative log and they fill in the report on that particular investigation. It's nice, simple, clear, and also aligned with what they might expect to see in a Leaving Cert exam paper. Very similar design and layout of what they might expect to see as well. But of course, we also want to incorporate additional practical work. And within the teacher resource book, we've got lots of extra additional practical work as well. As I mentioned previously, each of the practicals, each of the specified practicals has a series of questions as well relating to them, so the students can test their knowledge, whether that's independently or whether it's you as a ready-made homework. And again, all of the solutions are within the teacher resource book as well for you. And there are those additional ones. So chapter 7 again, we've got some additional notes on specified practicals, advice on preparing agar plates if you're doing it yourself, and some suggested additional practicals as well to increase the opportunity for our students to develop those scientific skills. I should say that we don't always have to introduce those scientific skills as a whole. It's very easy for us. We can get our students to come up with a conceptual procedure, or we can give students secondary data and ask to analyze that data as well. We don't always have to do a full practical to develop those practical skills. That's an important thing to be mindful of as well. And within our textbook, within the end of chapter assessments, within the analyze and evaluate Bloom's taxa, we have put a lot of opportunity for students to work with data and analyze data there. And that brings us neatly onto those end of chapter assessments. So again, as I said, they're scaffolded. We've got remember, lower order, understand. We're building complexity as the questions as we go along. We're developing those analytical skills. We're getting students to evaluate maybe a debate or an evidence, maybe again looking at results of an experiment. And we're also developing their creativity as well. One of those key competencies we've been tasked with as well. They're all, we've got lots and lots of opportunities for students to use their creative skills, develop their creative skills through their summative assessment. And with the Leaving Cert exams in mind, we've embedded those Leaving Cert sample paper questions into the learning portfolio. Any questions we weren't able to fit in there, they're on Guild Classroom, and you can access those within the Guild Classroom platform as well. And again, as I mentioned, all of the solutions ready for you, all in the end of chapter assessment, or in the teacher's resource book. If you haven't received it yet, you will certainly receive it very, very soon. And finally, I just want to give you a little bit of a guide through Guild Classroom's Guild's new online portal. So I'm going to open up a little video here for you. Again, be mindful, it might open up on a different window for you. Coming up for me now. So it's a really clean design, broken down within the ebooks. So all of those textbooks we've talked about, the textbook and all the supporting documents through the teacher resource book are there. It's really quick, it's really responsive, it's easy to navigate.
Eukaryotic.
You see those little sound bites happening straight away there. We've got lots of interactive quizzes for you. We're going to cycle through one of these now. So there's, again, let's keep in the same chapter. So lots of variation in the assessment, which is outlined within the specification. In this case, drag and drop, label the diagram. In this case, it's link the topics together. There's our planning materials, downloadable and editable. We've got our experiment videos, which again are embedded within the textbook, so students can scan a QR code or they can see them directly. And then we've PowerPoints for every chapter up there. Vast majority up there now. Others will be coming up very, very soon. And these PowerPoints are designed to be engaging, not too cluttered, but at the same time comprehensive enough for the student to use them as notes as well. So I'll go back to my presentation. Thank you very much. But a really, really clean. I must commend the Guild team. They've really created a really simple, easy to use, easy to navigate system that's really quick and responsive. And so far has been really popular in terms of what I've been doing in my classroom. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully I've been able to outline how Evolution, this textbook, but also the supporting books and the online resources will provide you, the teacher, with a clear, structured, exam-focused approach to the new specification. I assure you we have all the learning outcomes have been unpacked. We're implementing an inquiry-led approach as recommended by the NCCA and IDA, a thematic approach as recommended by the NCCA and IDA, and step-by-step guidance for you as you navigate the whole course, but also that biology and practice investigation as well, which I know there's a little bit of concern always in the room in relation to that. I'm going to invite Anita back in and my colleague Yvonne, who are going to guide us through a Q&A.
Great, Humphrey, thank you so very much. That was a great, clear presentation. and I felt really showed the very practical way that evolution supports the teaching of the new Spec. So thank you very much for that and for powering through it the way you did. Yvonne, thank you. You're welcome.
Hi, Anita.
Thanks for joining us. We can hear you loud and clear. That's great. So we're going to dive straight into the questions because we really don't want to hold you past 8 o'clock. So we got quite a lot of questions that came in during registration, and what we tried to do, because there was a lot of repetition of themes, so what we've tried to do is we've tried to group them together under a topic and to pick a question that kind of demonstrates the most commonly asked question. So Yvonne, if you're ready and you're able, I'm just going to dive in. So the first one was around the specified investigations, and Geraldine asked, how many investigations should be covered?
Okay, well, like Humphrey mentioned earlier on, that we have listed any of the investigations that are mentioned in the specification. We call them specified investigations. They're all listed in the introductory pages in evolution, and the students are expected to engage with all of those. If they don't, where there's multiple factors, as Humphrey mentioned, the transpiration, but also with the enzyme experiments, there's multiple factors there as well. It may not be possible for the students to investigate all 5 factors themselves. So in that case, they can take data from their peers, so they can, but they have to be able to write up each investigation and to be able to explain it and to answer questions on it. That was very clear from our meetings with the NCCA. They really clarified that. But it's in the specification, it really emphasizes biology as a practical subject, and it states that those specified investigations are really the minimum practical work that the students should be carrying out. And as Humphrey mentioned as well, bearing that in mind, we have at least, on average 2 additional investigations outlined in the teacher's resource book, and teachers can choose which of those they may wish to use with their own particular class and what suits their own setting. And we've kept them very simple as well, materials that you would have readily available.
Great. Okay, Humphrey, thank you for the practical demonstration of the physical book in your hand there. Thank you very much. Yvonne, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive on because there was quite a lot of questions, as you can imagine, around the AAC. A lot of them were about the time available to teach. So Caroline, for instance, said, will we be under pressure to get the course covered as well as the project? And she asks, how does our book manage this time pressure?
Yeah, well, myself and Humphrey did spend a lot of time going through our scheme of work, which we have developed for both 5th year and 6th year. So we have built in sufficient time for teachers to ensure that their students can engage fully with the AAC. Also, the fact that we have adopted a thematic approach means that we're not revisiting the same, there's not repetition. So it allows you to navigate the specification more fluidly. And also we have a lot of supports there for the AAC in evolution. There's a dedicated chapter at the back of the book dealing with the biology and practice investigation. And also in the learning portfolio, we have a template there that the students can use to guide them through the whole process of the AAC, whether it's their research or the next part when they're doing their data collection or their analysis. It really is laid out for them there.
Which would be great, because we know that's going to be so new to, obviously, to so many teachers as well as to students. So that hand holding there is brilliant. Great. Sorry, Humphrey, yeah?
Just to add a little bit of point that Yvonne made there, within the scheme of work, we've outlined the timings, but either timings within if you've got 1 hour classes or if you've got 40 minutes. So the 2 different, I suppose, the guides, depending on how you structure your timetable.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And that's in the TRB, is that what you said? In the teacher's resource book? Brilliant.
Scheme of work. Yeah.
Which brings me very smoothly on to my next question. So we did get a lot of questions around resources, but I do believe that Humphrey has addressed most of those in the presentation this evening. Just given the time, I'm going to leave those ones. But as I said to you, if any of your questions, if you feel they haven't been answered, they will be responded to in hopefully tomorrow, but in the coming days, let's say, because there's quite a lot of questions. So Lorraine did ask, how soon will the teacher's resource book be sent to schools? And I know Humphrey did reference it during his presentation, but just to clarify, if you have adopted the program, The teacher's resource book is now available, and if you have requested it, it's on its way out to schools. It's in transit as we speak. If you haven't requested it, I would urge you to get onto your rep. Just get in touch with your rep and request a copy for yourself. But stock is here and you know, is available for you. In the meantime, just to remind you, of course, that you can access, again, if you've adopted Evolution, you can access the full teacher's resource book now online on Guild Classroom. So that's actually an important one to remember. Yeah, if you haven't got it. So a lot of questions again, Yvonne, around the teaching approach. It seems to be something, I guess, with a new spec coming in, the teachers are concerned about. So Paula asked, do we have a different teaching approach, and how do we carry this out in the classroom?
I would say most definitely yes. Even myself, my approach since I've gone back is different to what I would have done with the old syllabus. And really, I suppose my go-to along with Evolution is in the specification on page 40. It's outlines there the teaching for student learning. And well, I suppose first of all, it says, you know, students have to take charge of their own learning. And I'm really using the flipped classroom, and that really helps because students have to take ownership. Then I'm getting them to research or to study the next section of the chapter in advance and make out their own notes on it. So they're developing, you know, summary skills and note taking there, so straight away, and also frees up our time in class that we can engage in more discussion and more engaging activities. Also on that page 40, it talks about how the students have to take part in well-structured group discussions, and the fact that we have 2 debate topics for each chapter in the TRB with pros and cons outlined. So I've started using that with my own students. I've given them a debate topic to research as homework. I've given this half of the class has to research the pro side, the other side has to research the against, and then we're going to have we'll have a lively debate. So that's something I wouldn't really have done before in ETA, so it definitely does change my approach in the classroom. But what I'm finding is that Evolution is actually all the approach that you're supposed to take. Evolution has it there ready made for you. So it's already built in for me. It also talks about the students have to be able to interpret secondary data. The fact that we have used Bloom's taxonomy in our end chapter questions, that means that there's our analysis questions there. So in every single chapter, the students are going to get to engage in this secondary data. Also, it mentions the students being able to read scientific texts and interpret them. And I'm really enjoying using those cross-cutting themes, the boxes that are built into every chapter. And I'm starting to modify even our PowerPoints, which are very comprehensive, but I'm starting to pull out those additional cross-cutting themes out of the teacher's resource book and getting the students. Actually, I was doing some of that today, and they're really interested in it because I suppose it's bringing biology into the real world biology into the classroom for them. So I'm finding that I don't have to think about worry about that if I'm adopting the right approach or not by using Evolution, the textbook, in connection with my teacher resource book. It's actually guiding me through that approach, exactly as it's laid out on page 40. They talk about modelling as well, and again, modelling is using pictures or representations, or it could be a physical model as well. But again, using Bloom's taxonomy, the create questions there. We've got the students creating posters, or whether it's, as we said, a debate or so on. So it really is covering everything under that approach.
So it's really just by using the book without them even noticing they're going to be using the new teaching approach. And then the gold dust, it sounds to me like, is the teacher's resource book, which is just bringing it, really integrating it and
I'm not afraid that I'm not afraid that I'm leaving anything out, or that I'm not doing something I should be doing. By using the book as it is, I'm ticking all the boxes.
It also sounds like a lovely way of re-engaging students who've gone through TY. Actually, I'm just thinking with your debates and your research and everything, it actually sounds like a lovely way of re-engaging them in the academic. That's great. So I'm going to ask you one more question. It's a complicated question, but I'll see how quickly you can get it. So Donna asked, with so few sample exam questions, can you suggest where it's best to get questions that will be similar to the sample ones so that they know they're using suitable questions when testing students? So you got all of that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, with regard to exam questions, I suppose, as Humphrey mentioned earlier on, we have unpacked all the sample exam papers and we have built those into the learning portfolio. There's additional ones that aren't printed in the learning portfolio are available in online Guild classrooms. So that's very useful, whether it's even at the end of a chapter, you want more exam questions, they're there for you to use, or if you want to even use them for your end of term assessment, you could use them for that. But again, I'm going back to that page 40 where it talks about teaching for student learning and the specification. And it says that the students have to be able to, in assessment, use questions of varying cognitive demand, is what this says that the students have to be able to deal with. And that's what we have in our end of chapter assessment, is questions of varying cognitive demand, because we're going up through Bloom's taxonomy and you're going from the lower order recall to higher order. And really, I suppose all the sample papers show us is that the students, rather than recall, it is now that they have to be able to engage and interpret and analyze material in front of them. And we have that built into every single chapter. So I find even already, by getting the students to answer those kind of questions, my own students, they're thinking in a different way and they're really accessing those higher order questions. So that's their exam style questions are built into every chapter.
Super, great. Thank you very much, Yvonne. That was great.
Thanks,
and very informative. So thank you very much, and for packing so much into a very short space of time. So well done, well done. So everybody, it is very close to 8 o'clock now, so I think we will wrap up the questions there. As I said to you, any that we didn't get to this evening, they will be answered, so don't worry, we will get back to you as soon as we can. You will receive an email tomorrow with the recording of this evening's webinar, so you can share that with your colleagues if you need to. And there will be a link to our Guild Education website, so you can sample Evolution online and sample the digital resources for the programme. So I would encourage you to go in and check that out. If you don't have the book, you'll be able to see the online versions or samples of them, of the textbook, the learning portfolio, the investigative blog, and the TRB. There will also be a link in it to find your local rep. I would encourage you to reach out to them, particularly if you are considering adopting Evolution. They will work with you to get the very best out of your school book grant, however we can manage that. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local rep. So finally, there is a short survey at the end of the webinar. There's only about 3 questions in it, so we would love you to fill that in. We are trying to look at ways of later in the year, for those who've adopted Evolution, of how we can further support you. So we would like to keep in touch with you, see where your pain points are, and hopefully provide some more support, maybe like this webinar later on in the year. So I think that's it for this evening. Again, thank you so much for, look at that, 1959. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us this evening. That was it was really good to see so many of you here. I hope we have addressed any concerns or pain points or questions that you have as you start back into this new school year. And you know where we are if you have any other questions, so please do reach out to us. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Humphrey.
Thanks, Humphrey. Thanks, Diane, everybody.
Well done. Okay, thank you. Good night.